Greetings and welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Don Cardenas, and today I am incredibly pleased to have someone I've known online probably for, I want to say maybe a decade, if not more. We've had the chance to meet in person a few times at C2E2, but this is our first time being able to sit down and actually have an actual chat that's not surrounded by the cacophonous noise of a convention. So without further ado, please welcome the awesomely talented Marie Enger. Marie, thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Don. Thanks for having me on the show. It is actually kind of weird because I don't think that we've ever had a conversation that wasn't like it was either at a comic convention or surrounded by a crowd of people. It has never
Yeah,
just been in a quiet room where we are the only people. It's
yeah.
very strange.
Yeah, it's crazy when I sit down and think about it, like, oh, I've talked to this person a bunch. I'm like, well, no, we've
Yeah.
interacted online and we've like had chit chat at a con, but it's like you when you actually sit down, which is kind of the reason I do the podcast a lot, is to be able to connect more with people I've just known for so long.
It
Um, yeah,
it comics especially kind of feels like you meet people online and then when you meet them in person, you're like, oh, you actually are kind of the same person that I knew.
hmm,
And you forget that you only see each other like once a year. Maybe it's because we're so consistent about it. Like we may only see each other once a year in person, but we do see each other every year in person.
yeah, it's
Like
at the
which is kind of
yeah,
cool. Like compared to other like I don't know like other internet social groups like don't get the occasion to hang out like multiple times every year, but we kind of do, which
yeah,
is pretty sick. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, and it's nice because doing the podcast now. This is episode 137. You know, and I've had the chance to just like just have these conversations with people I've just known for so long, like our mutual bud Dave Jordan. And Dave and I, we actually were able to like grab lunch one day at a con, at one of the cons or whatever. But even then, it's just like you're just surrounded, but like just sit down and just shoot the shit and just talk about the things we're doing and enjoying is seems like a rare treat these days. So
Yeah.
and the life of the artists, if we don't schedule it to happen, we're probably just not gonna
Yeah.
do it because we're gonna over justify like, oh, I need to get this X work done, I need to do this, I can't stop and have this conversation, because I'm gonna be too distracted trying to draw this thing and all this. And it's like, no, you got to do that. You got to do
Yeah.
that. You got to talk, you got to
You
people
you
sometimes.
you must remember how to be around other people. Otherwise,
Yeah.
if nothing else, oh man, I don't have any other conventions until the fall. None.
Mhm.
Do you have any over the summer that you're doing at like any small stuff up in Chicago or
um what I
Milwaukee?
liked, it's only been one the past couple years, but I was doing like smaller library shows, which are
Hmm.
really fun because they're like one day, few hours. There's this one in I'm doing next month in Arlington Heights, which is like an hour away from me, an hour from just over an hour from Chicago too, proper. And it's they call it Fan Expo or whatever. It's actually a really well put together show. They have like tons of events, and last year they had a rock band who did like video game covers, and they had like guest speakers on. And
That's sick.
um I think I'm trying to think who they had last. What's his name? He did a lot of the younger age Star Wars. What was it? Fox Brown? I don't know. They have
Mm,
like a lot of younger age people there, and then there's people there I see every year because we're all there. And they were at C2A2 as well, but Steph Stanga and Tom Bacon, I see them there every year. A bunch of other great Chicago artists area, and I'm definitely not like my stuff isn't necessarily like kid friendly, but they're always so nice to me. They always invite me to come back, and my kind of niche is kind of like mom and dad don't want their kids buying my stuff, but mom and dad kind of like, what's this
yeah.
you know and it's again, it's just a fun show. But that's kind of like the one other one I do besides C2E2. I had done other library shows, but they've kind of gone away after COVID and all that. So I've been looking for some more, but also just the justification. We kind of touched on it before we started recording, but like,
Yeah.
so expensive,
Yeah.
so expensive to do
Yeah.
a big convention. I was looking at what's the one that's in August? They took over Wizard World. I forget their name.
Oh no.
Is
I
it
don't
Fan
know.
Expo?
Wizard World
No,
was so
it's
cursed though.
yeah.
I
Um,
don't necessarily disagree that Wizard World needed to be taken over by someone else. I saw some haunting things at so many
yeah.
different Wizard Worlds. It was just uh good luck, I guess, to whoever took over that cursed IP.
Yeah, it's this one in August, and it's kind of it's got decent people coming in and all that, and
Mhm.
um
Is it in
I believe
Chicago or is it
it's in Rosemont. It's in Rosemont,
okay?
so it's just outside of Chicago. It's where the Wizard World used to be. Um, I'm trying to think of the name, but Michelle Abinader. She's I think she's gonna be there. She was the editor for a bunch of great anthologies and writer. Um, she's working with I believe Heather Antos, editor for
Okay.
IDW, and I think they're going to that show on top of some other people. But I've heard like yeah, it's Fan Expo. So it's called Fan Expo Chicago, I think. Um, so then there's also Cake in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm doing cake. Are
Yeah.
you doing cake this year?
No, I never apply for it because I feel like I'm not the person for that. Like that's not my
That
thing.
that might be true. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really, I don't necessarily draw a superhero book, but or anything like that. That's really mainstream. But my stuff isn't with the audience, which is perfectly fine. I'd like to
Yeah.
attend it one day and check it out, but it doesn't. I've been told by a couple people that who have done it that like yeah, you'd be fine there. Like,
Mhm.
but I'm also like I don't know. I just you know I don't feel like it's my
I
space.
Yeah, I would just say it's like my impulse is to tell you that you'd be fine, but you're actually like kind of in a weird spot because you're right. Like you don't really do superhero comics. You do a lot of different stuff, but you're not excuse me, doing superhero comics or like super indie looking things either.
Yeah,
Like you have
yeah,
a very specific sort of style. You're just not like putting it to use in a way that is like cape and cowl, you know?
yeah,
But
yeah,
there's a ton of call for that and a ton of different creators who do that sort of stuff, but there really isn't like a convention that is like an indie comics expo that features only that sort of artist.
yeah,
Someone who's
yeah,
doing like creator owned I don't know. Huh. But not
yeah.
like
Because
quite not quite as DIY?
yeah, I mean they're, the books look slick. They look
Yeah.
there's full on colors. It's
Mhm.
printed on. It is print on demand stuff, but it is also printed on. It's not Xerox and stapled together
Yeah.
at the FedEx Kinkos. And not to dig at that stuff. I love that stuff just as much as everybody else. One day I might get into doing some stuff like that just for funsies, like just
Mhm.
who doesn't have an idea for like tons of like small mini comics and things like that would work with something like that. But yeah, it's definitely one of those shows where it's like I would at least like to attend before I even like try to like even think I would go there, just to kind of see if like okay, am I with this vibe, or
I
am I just
I
not?
think you would totally enjoy the vibe. I think you should come. I'm kind of like of the opinion that everybody should come to that sort of show. And I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but it's also just kind of with print on demand being so accessible now, even compared to like 3 years ago.
Yeah,
It's almost as inexpensive to do a print on demand book as it is to just go to Kinko's and print a zine. And so I'm
it is.
hoping that it like especially with Ingram Spark having lunar distribution and being able to put your
Mm-hmm.
books in stores via Ingram Spark directly. I don't know. I think it's going to lower the barrier to entry a little bit for people, and I think it's going to make everybody have like a very high quality looking book that wasn't a like either a pain in the ass to print or like
Yeah,
cost an arm and a leg to print, or
yeah,
then you have to deal with like I don't know like 15 years ago when they had like all those like weirdly shady comic book printing companies that would pop up
Mm-hmm.
and then do like crazy trim jobs on shit and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There seems to be less of those now because
Yeah.
everything's gotten a lot better, but I don't know, huh?
Mm.
I'm thinking about book design.
Yeah. No, well, even then, like when I was doing my first book, Packs of Low Country, we were going through Kablam, which is one of the
Yeah.
bigger print on demands. And that was we started printing that like in 2015, 2014. We started printing that.
Oh wow.
And even then, like it wasn't super cheap, but it was like accessible. And
Mhm.
then actually the trade for Packs of Low Country I did through Ingram Spark because I was trying to find after the ill-advised hardcover Kickstarter failed a collection. I'm like, I still want to put together a book, so I was just looking at,
Mhm.
and they had a thing, and that was a whole process about getting the trim right and all that. And
Yeah, that would be
but
my big advice with Ingram Spark is just like accept that you can't do a full bleed. Everything has to
yeah,
be in the safe area, no questions asked. Don't try to fuck with it even a little bit. Can I swear?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. I assumed that it was okay, but I didn't ask, and
No,
then I was like, oh shit.
it, I try not to swear, but when I actively try not to swear, I find I just swear more.
Yeah.
So I just let it go. And also, having a podcast that's about, that has metal in the title, for some reason saying you can't swear though, it seems kind of, antithetical
I
to the idea.
I felt that way too, but then I was like, I haven't heard Don swear yet. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Uh, but no, I just enjoy it and it comes out, so I just wanted to make sure that it was okay.
Yeah.
Um,
We're talking
I
about
have a
Ingram
brain
Spark
cell.
and the trim. Yeah, yeah. You have to
Yeah, just
like,
don't fuck with the trim at all. Just you're just gonna have to have everything in the safe area, and that's just gonna be it. And occasionally you'll get some crazy books. I did like a copy of Super Secret Mystery Comic, and the first 12 pages were like a flute book, like a sheet music book for flutes.
okay.
And then it just like went right back to the regular comic. But for the first couple of pages, it was just flute music. And I wonder, like, if that happened to my stuff, like, is someone else getting like part of my comic in
Yeah.
their like
Yeah.
flute music potentially? Because it's got to all come off the same big line, right? And so it was an
Yeah.
8.5
Yeah.
by 11 book. So theoretically, all of this comic would be going to like sheet music or flute music. I
Hmm.
don't know. I hope so.
Well, with even, last year, our first printing of Evie and the Helsings 1 through Kablam, who we use because Steve Bryant, my co-creator and the writer of the book, he's been using Kablam since like they've existed,
Hmm.
and he knows the owner. He's good friends with them. He's got a good relationship with them. But we had, I want to say, close to 50 books where it's our cover. You open it up, an entirely different comic was inside, um, complete with its
Oh
cover.
no.
And then
Oh.
I just found
Oh.
out
Ooh,
I just found a
bonus.
couple. Yeah, I just found a couple copies of something where it was printed backwards and upside down. So when I open it up, it's backwards and I'm like, I only found a couple copies, so I'm like, okay, whatever. I've had these in our inventory for like months now. Like I'm just gonna let it go. But it's like, there's just the weird things that can happen with that.
My mom is a teacher, and when we moved to Missouri, we moved close to like, there's a warehouse that also used to house all the old like Lion Forge books before they pulped them.
Mm-hmm.
That had like all the Scholastic book stuff. And so they would
Okay.
get like all the like seconds books that came off the Scholastic book fair trucks or whatever. And so you would get like copies of literally just everything kind of in there waiting to either be sold at a discount or pulped. And you could go if you were a teacher and just buy as many of the books as you wanted. And so she would just take us there and we would go and do like Scholastic Book Fair at this place with all the books were just bizarro messes. And so I had a copy of Ender's Game, which was kind of odd, but you're a kid and you're like, oh, this seems really
Yeah.
cool, and you don't know he's a horrible homophobe yet. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
I was like reading it, and then it like got kind of weird where I'd have to like flip through, and then I'd have to turn the book upside down, and then it was like backwards for a while, and it was just out of order. Just I like now because I do so much of my own book design stuff, and I like book design stuff a lot. It's been really really fun and kind of rewarding. But once you like learn how the guts are made, you start thinking about like how things went wrong to produce that book. And
Yeah,
so now that like I kind of know how you put a book together, I'm wondering what parts of the book got mixed up when they were putting it together and how many
yeah,
books looked like that. Like, yeah, anyway, yeah,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, just stopping and thinking about that. Like but even even going back to the Ingram Spark thing, where I was using InDesign to try to like put the book together and all that, and like
Mhm.
you don't realize that one thing is like nudged over slightly. So when they send you like the digital proof, and all of a sudden it's like half the page is missing, and you're like, what is this? And that was mainly the giant pain in the ass about that was just the fact that the book was so big that I couldn't upload it all in one zip file to their server or whatever. I had to upload it twice, but it would time out on me. So every time I had to contact them and say,
Weird.
I'm trying to upload my book here, but your uploading
How
system is
many
like timing out.
pages was it?
So then they had to say, okay, send us a link to your whatever. I had to like go through that process like four
Huh.
times until I finally got it right. And then I finally was
Weird.
able to order like a physical proof copy, which still had some errors
Huh.
on it when I had to go fix again. But like,
Yikes.
yeah, it was just the whole thing. And I feel like I haven't gone back to Ingram since then, with my initial orders.
I would be pretty frustrated
But
if that was my experience. I get that.
again, but also this was several years ago, and I'm sure
Hmm.
the infrastructure for something like that is much easier now.
I mean, I don't know. I print much shorter books.
Yeah,
I don't have the attention span for longer stuff.
yeah, yeah, and um, yeah, I got to order some more copies anyway because I'm like down to my last few, and I don't
Hell
think I
yeah,
ever gave you a copy because people watching, Marie colored 24 pages of that book
yeah. A
for
while
us.
back, it was 2015, like you said. Yeah, I was like when I was looking back through
No,
the
I
emails.
was it. That was you colored like the first half of issue 6 was the double sized last issue,
Hmm.
and that was I want to say
18?
2017
I don't know.
because
Oh,
I
I should not
finished
by
it
sent you.
because I
I'll
finished
look
it
that up
after
later.
after my daughter was born.
Oh
Um,
damn.
so yeah, so I don't know if I ever gave you a actual physical copy of the book or not, but or if you even want
Perhaps I will
it.
unearth
But
it when I'm moving. If not, you can give
yeah,
me a copy when we move.
yeah, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm almost out. I'm almost out of copies. Like, and like, should I make more or should I just let it die?
I
I don't
am
know.
pretty mercenary with this shit.
I definitely don't have space to stock a whole bunch
Yeah, I
more.
would just say, like, do
So
you have a place to store them? How much do you sell them for? Do you want to keep selling them? And, like, your art is different now.
yeah,
And the one beauty of, like, not having to. One of the beautiful things about self publishing is only a certain amount of those books ever need to exist. So if you don't really like them and you're not happy with them anymore because your style got better or you're like, it didn't sell very well,
hmm
then it can just die and nobody else gives a shit, which is beautiful.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know.
I'm reminded of I forgot who unearthed it, but someone picked up some of Phil Hester's like earliest work, like I think black and white comics or whatever.
Mhm.
And for whoever's watching me who may not know who Phil Hester is, he's a you know amazing comic book artist. He's been in industry for decades. But yeah, he's he's someone. I think it was Chris Burnham who unearthed it and like sent him a picture of it, and it's like oh my god, these things exist still.
I have a friend in St. Louis who
That's
saved everything I've ever done. She's been my friend since college. So she's got like old shit, older shit than anyone else has seen. And I found it once when I was sleeping at our house for a sleepover because we have sleepovers. Because when you're like a 30-something-year-old without kids, you can just go and have sleepovers at other people's houses. And it's awesome because they have beds. So I was sleeping in her bedroom, her extra bedroom, and I saw it in there, and it was like, oh no, other people have slept here, so they've definitely also seen it. And it was very sweet that she kept it, and it made me feel good that she kept it, but it also put like a visceral fear in my heart because like I I don't really have imposter syndrome. I don't have an ego, but I don't have imposter syndrome. I typically like to see myself I like to see myself improve every 5 years, noticeably improve. And so
Yeah.
every 5 years, I think I noticeably improve. Like I get better about, I have like
Hmm.
I level up hard every 5 years. So I'm on the cusp. But
Okay.
I level up incrementally every year, or I try to. And so I had seen like the past decade of work all in these two books, and it was just like, I want to die. It was very awful. And I used to do all my work in Adobe Illustrator, like all of it, like pencils,
Oh,
inks, colors. And
yeah, that sounds frustrating to me.
it's
The
not,
learning
yeah, I
time that
think
I had
most
with that.
people would, but I'm really good at Illustrator now because I did everything in Illustrator. And part of like what's kind of weird too is over time, I live trace used to be so bad. It's better now than it used to be, but it used to be so bad. And hopefully it won't matter in a couple of months anyway because Adobe will die. But until then, uh, but now like I've just kind of adapted my style to be easily live traced because I've spent so much time doing stuff in Illustrator that I'm kind of like, I know that this will work. I know that this won't work. So it makes my stuff really easy to vectorize. So I can
Yeah.
do like some of my corporate work that's not necessarily comics focused is I do a lot of work for like corporate displays. So very, very large illustrations that are like,
Yeah.
I think the largest I did was 1,200 square feet. So really big
Oh,
stuff. And so like big Where's Waldo style illustrations. And so to do something so large, I have to break it down panel by panel because they're super detailed. Um, I don't actually know that you've seen these. Don't I don't think that I talked about them a lot in comics world. Like I because I have like the two divisions, right? Like I have my game self
yeah.
and my comic self. And my game self does a lot more corporate work than my comic book self. It's weird.
Yeah,
But
I haven't seen you post or talk much about the non-comic stuff.
oh yeah. So I do huge big illustrations, large stuff. I did like a huge display at Gen Con in 2022, I think, and then it at PAX Unplugged in 2023. So just big stuff. And I really like doing it, but um, you got to do Illustrator stuff really quickly, and so I would do everything in
Yeah.
Illustrator. And I felt really lucky, like all that work that I used to do that she had in her house, I did.
Hmm.
It did like pay off long term, but it was very haunting. There was a lot of texture. I had like a very texture heavy phase for many years, and this was like the absolute worst of it when none of the textures were like of high resolution, so they were all like 72
Hmm.
dpi, and I would drag them into Adobe Illustrator, and then I would
Yeah.
like not live trace, but I'd filter them super weird, and so they would like slow my computer way down and like not really yield a satisfactory result. And now I just do it all in Clip Studio, and it doesn't matter, and it takes half the amount of time, and I just feel so dumb.
Yeah.
Ugh, so much wasted time.
Yeah. I'm approaching a mainly for whenever I have to color something, I'm big into like I don't really want to color much. I just want to kind of get it flatted. And then I just want to
Hmm.
like start tossing textures to be the values and the things like that and just layering stuff on like that. That's more
Everyone always
fun to
wants.
me than
It's more
going around and
fun, but
shading things.
I think it's. I have a couple I keep in my toolbox for times of need that I break out, but
Hmm.
it's a slippery slope for me. If I start using one
Yeah.
texture, I start
Oh
using
no,
two. If I
yeah,
start
yeah.
using
I'm
two, I
not saying
start
it's
using
great.
eight.
I'm not saying it's a great way to approach it. This is the way I approach it because I don't
Yeah.
do a lot of coloring. Um and
I don't think a lot of people do because it's not like I mean obviously I love colorists because I am a colorist partially at least I think still, but it's not like a glamorized part of the comic book industry at all,
no.
and rates have been so low for so long that I think a lot of people are like I know very few people who go into comics now and they're like, I want to be an inker. They're like, I want to draw comics. And that to them
Yeah,
means like doing all of it. And with like, I am not the best colorist in the world by far and away. Um, but I think that like I can kind of tell what looks good and what doesn't look good. Coloring's really hard. I think a lot of people think they can color and think it'll be easy, and then it's just not. And it's boring, which is like almost worse than being bad. I would
yeah,
rather it be laughably bad or memorably bad than just like boring and just like the real world
yeah,
because
because at least the person's going for something. You can tell
hmm
they're shooting for something, and that there's probably a chance they'll get there one day if they just
but
keep going for it.
yeah. Or
Um,
maybe they won't and it'll just get like weirder and weirder and worse, but at least still it's not just like gray or like just everything else. I don't
yeah,
know. I think a lot of like the airbrush tones usually look kind of like people think they look better than they do. I think they look good with like certain types of line art, but not all. Coloring's really hard. I think people kind of discount how hard it is. I loved like for a while it felt like in the middle 2010s that colors were having like a really big moment where like Rico Renzi and Jordi Belair were
yeah,
felt like real hot shots, and so it felt like a minute for a while that people would get into like coloring comics, but then it kind of is. I don't know. I don't ever hear people who say that they want to just color comics, unless they're other colorists who've been coloring comics for a
yeah.
long time.
And else the amount of work colors have to do these days
Yeah.
sometimes is insane. There's a
For
lot of
very little money on like
yeah,
super stupid deadlines. Them and letterers too. Like you get like everything's super late, and then you get paid a pittance to do it, and then you have to take on so many projects, so it's like a constant battering of that kind of stuff. Um, but it's but those are also always where like comics look the worst. Like if they're done poorly, they always make comics look so shitty and cheap and bad.
mhm,
So it's like an area of necessary high skill that just so often gets overlooked because if you do it really well, then you don't know that you did it well. You just are like, damn, this is such a cool cohesive piece.
yeah.
Um,
Um, well, it's also similar to like lettering too. People think like, oh, I can just letter this myself, and then it's like,
yeah,
no, you can't. It's
yeah.
I've dipped my toes into all aspects of comic creation, and lettering is tough. It's not as tough as coloring, but it's definitely made tougher by the circumstances and with you have to do it because letters get like next to no time to do the work, and then next thing you know they have to do changes or they have to work with an artist who didn't plan on making room for balloons
Well,
or
that's the best part about like going back to being a cartoonist after doing like letterist duty is now typically, and I think I sent you some of my pencils when I sent over some stuff.
yeah,
I
yeah,
typically do all of my lettering while I do my pencils so that I know what information can be conveyed versus what can't be. Um, and sometimes I kind of push it because I'm a busy artist, but it's been really helpful to just know how to do that. And I don't always do it like in Illustrator or InDesign. Sometimes I just pull it from like the Google Doc, but it's been really helpful. I really like it. I never have to sacrifice art, which is great. I always hated having to do that with other books that I lettered because I was just like, oh, you did this like really cool thing, and I gotta cover it up because there are 8,000 words in this balloon, and I'm not allowed to cut them,
yeah,
but I gotta get them in there. All your art is gone. Sorry, bud.
yeah. It's rough. And yeah, I was looking at the what you sent earlier, and the I was gonna ask you about that because it is the pencils, but then I see sometimes where you wrote in, or you
hmm
have your circles for your balloons, and then you went back in and put them in quote unquote proper
Yeah.
as you go through it, and that seems like a really smart way to do it all. And from everything I read of your stuff, anyway, it seems like you tend to like let things breathe visually. Uh, So like, just I can't imagine there's a lot of times where you're coming across like I don't have room to put any dialogue or anything in here. Like
I,
it feels like
I
it's
don't
all part of your
know.
process to have things,
Yeah.
you know, not that there's not dense or in detail, but like there's, it
Hmm.
seems like it's already part. I'm assuming it is, but it's part of the plan as you're already thumbing
Yeah.
things out and
Hmm.
all that. So it's never like later on you're like, oh, I gotta fit this in or whatever. Because I will come across that a lot with one of the books I work on, where it's like, you know, there's literal times where I've just had to like take a panel and like just shrink it all
Yeah.
so they could
Yeah. And
fit in
it
what they wanted
sucks
to
because
fit
you've
in.
spent so much time on it. And it's
Yeah,
like already
yeah,
you have to like remember that people are only going to look at it for like a second or two.
yeah,
But then like
yeah,
shrinking it down, I mean, if I spent like an hour and a half on a panel and I had to shrink it down so that like none of that detail would be visible and I might as well have drawn a stick figure, I would just be pissed about the time wasted and it would sour my mood because I'm a petty bitch. But yeah, I would just be, it would be up, I would be so irritated about it.
yeah. And a lot of it I do to myself too, by like, zooming in too much when I am working on things, or
Yeah.
putting in too much detail into a background where I'm like, there's gonna be a balloon over this. Why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah.
And just like not doing that. But it's all part of the process. Like you mentioned, you came, you see yourself improving greatly, or in larger increments every 5 years. Like you want to see like
Yeah.
a jump, right?
Yeah.
Where you aim to have a jump or like that.
Hmm.
And uh it's definitely one of those things that I don't have such a general mindset about that for myself. I do sometimes stop and look back. 'Cause if I look back at Pax of the Low Country, I'm gonna see a lot of things where it's like, oh wow, yeah, I do that a lot better now.
Hmm.
And then the trouble for me comes in where I come across something like, well, actually, I did that good. Like, wait, can I do that still? Or did I lose that skill?
Yeah.
um,
No, that's real
and
too. I
and
had
then
a, I
yeah,
I did a
it,
tattoo design for someone and they needed like a continuation of the original design that I had done. And I didn't have it. I had to redraw it from scratch because I had just never drawn a lower half to this character.
mhm,
And so I just redrew the whole character and they were like, actually, I liked it better the other way. Can you finish it that way? And I was like, I don't know if I can draw that way anymore, actually, because that was like 5 years ago.
yeah,
And I've changed. Like I became rounder
mhm,
and it you can't really go back. Like it was fun to try different things, but it was also kind of nice as like a reminder for why I changed different parts about my visual language too. Um,
yeah,
there were a lot of things that I thought like I thought I liked them visually, but then as I drew them, they didn't feel as good to draw. Like the
mhm,
act of drawing them didn't feel as satisfactory, or I felt like they were a lot stiffer, like the life wasn't there anymore, which I was really excited. Like I think improvement is always objective for everybody, right? But for me, it's always like, do I like what I'm doing better? Like, do I think
mhm,
that I'm doing something? I'm like, I feel like my work is very stiff. I feel like while my work has a lot of energy to it, it doesn't always have a lot of like satisfactory movement that I wish it had. And
okay,
it's like one of those areas where like I'm just always constantly trying to strive to improve just a better flow, just a more lively page with a little bit more, and not energy in the way that I have it there because I understand fundamentally that there's like an energy there, but it's like a weird it's like a weird radioactive energy, not like a movement energy. It's like a vibe.
mhm,
And I want
okay,
the flow. I want the movement and the flow. And so if I can achieve that like incrementally year by year, then I think it's an improvement. Um,
mhm.
but I don't necessarily know that other people would look for that in my work. or if other people would consider that as an improvement for their own work, or if they would want to see like a higher bar of criteria or a more, yes, thank you. It's pie time. Um,
Well,
uh,
um, as you enjoy your pie,
I will.
I can comment on from my perspective of viewing your work. Um, I sympathize with the idea of like my stuff needs more. I need to feel the movement more. It needs to have that flowing energy or whatever. But as I've been told, and as I view your stuff, like I don't see that as something that's missing. It's just I don't look at it and say I wish this had this. So it's like really from your own personal, which is
Mhm.
probably the most valid perspective because it's your work. But from like, as someone who's reading it, it's never a thing that's like, yeah, I could see what you're talking about. You could, like, no, I don't see the fact that there would there's something that needs to be sharpened or adjusted or made quote unquote better in any other way. And that's something I've enjoyed about your work from the beginning is that as obviously you will change and develop and you know improve on visual language and things like that. It's never been in my eyes something that's like not there yet. You know what I mean? Like it's not like it comes across as like extremely intentional and never like, oh, this is just as good as they are right now. This is like, no, this is a good comic. This is a good, like it's never, um, it was never something I was like, oh yeah, yeah, no, I enjoyed it, but like, man, in a couple years they're really gonna be. No, it was never like that, you know, and seeing your stuff now, and even you mentioned that it's like rounder now, which I'm like, oh yeah, now that you mention it, I can see there's more of a roundness to the shapes and the figures and all that. And I was looking through the preview of Death to the Wizard King that you sent to me, and uh, which looks really awesome. And I'm trying to I was just looking at it, I'm like, this is Death to Wizard Kings, sorry, plural.
Yes.
Um, uh, I'm looking at it and I'm like, there's something about your work that just like I'm trying to figure out like how to pinpoint it because I don't like you know, just for my own personal reference, I'm like, it's what is this mix that I'm seeing here in terms of
Hmm.
like influences or style or whatever, and it's never to like put it in that box for me. It's just like just to give my brain like it's like an itch. I got to scratch. It's like
Hmm.
it's giving me something. What is it? And I'm for some reason my brain's just going to. It's like Mike Mignola through like the filter of like tattoo flash, like
Huh.
old school tattoo flash.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting.
And um and it's not again it's not intended like, oh, that, oh, 1 + 1 = 2, but it's like,
Hmm.
okay, it's because just how you frame your panels, the your
It's the
strong
it's
use of
the
silhouettes
the
and
triangle.
yeah, and keep
Everybody's a
and just keep and
triangle.
if it works it works. Right.
Triangle is the most powerful shape. It works for a reason, but like I learned to draw. I didn't have art classes growing up. I
mm-hmm.
learned to draw by watching Invader Zim for like 6 months as a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
then that was like basically it until college. And so that's how I learned to draw, was that, and like
Okay.
looking up screen caps of Invader Zim, and then getting into like the whole slave labor graphics like trade stuff. So I grew up with like that kind of stuff, but I
Right.
didn't read like Hellboy or anything until I was out of college. So I had not like I had kind of solidified my art style before I even knew who Mignola was, which is
Mm-hmm.
I don't really feel like it's blasphemy to not know stuff. I kind of came to comics
No,
late in the
no.
game, and it was not as accessible for me in a rural town, and so I'm just I was uneducated, and so now I I learned I think that I started off drawing like Jonan Vasquez as a kid because that's what I wanted. So
Yeah.
that's where a lot of that comes in. And then I saw Mike Mignola and I really liked it, but I really loved Carl Christian Crumples, who was like a also kind of like a heavy German expressionistic, big spot blacks, chunky lines, woodcut looking stuff that I really, really adored. And then later, I joke with my husband that I'm in my Guy Davis era. I also want to escape Dark Horse a little bit, and I want to go do something else, please, with health insurance forever. And everybody's getting rounder, and the
Yeah.
backgrounds are getting more cluttered. Um,
You know,
but I love Guy
you
Davis, so
you
that's okay.
you say Guy Davis, and I'm like, okay, I get the
Yeah,
vibe. I get the
yeah,
vibe
I
with the
love Guy
work
Davis.
for that for sure. Um, yeah, and it's again, it's just more my visual touchstones because I don't know much about Invader Zim or Yonan Vasquez's work. I've
No,
heard a lot of people
no.
reference them a lot, so you know, and looking it up, I'm like, yeah, I see, I can see the influence, or at least the appeal and all that, and it's not entirely far removed. I think from a lot of comic work like Mignola and stuff like that, because Mignola
Yeah,
himself has changed, not
yeah.
no huge
Considerably since he
glacial
started.
changes, but he's definitely, if you look at stuff from the early 90s to now, he's
Hmm.
definitely made adjustments. He's definitely refined things
It's
and
really
all that.
crazy going back and seeing like first Hellboy versus Hellboy in Hell. I love Mignola's work. I have a huge Ape Sapien tattoo on my arm. I obviously have like I don't know if they're all in shot, but I have like my Hellboy shelf and more Hellboys on my other shelf that you can't see. Just Hellboys everywhere, Ape Sapiens everywhere. So I absolutely adore it, but it's kind of rough at the beginning now if you look back and you see like what he's got, and when you start reading it, like before, you're like, I never felt like it wasn't enough. I always felt like it was really good. And I still feel that way about Mignola's stuff when I read it. I still feel like that when I read any comic from the beginning. But if I start in the middle and I go back and I skip around, I do notice lots of differences. And I can see where everyone got better and where they improved. And it's
Hmm.
just interesting to see like the choices that people make for their own work and how they kind of want to proceed with what they want to improve with and what choices they make. I don't know. I really
Yeah,
like it.
yeah.
And I loved, I again, like I believe in the power of the triangle,
Hmm.
and especially like in Hellboy and Hell, it was really part of the way that my brain works is I like to put things together and fill empty spaces, and I really like his compositions because I'm able to kind of like pull them apart and then repiece them back together in my head in a very satisfactory way because he doesn't have a whole lot of like straight lines, but everything kind of feels like it crunches together. And it was so beautiful seeing like the refining of like his splashy background shape, that like lightning bolt that cuts through.
Yeah.
Seeing that at the beginning versus seeing it now is a very interesting. I just really like it. It's very satisfying.
Hmm.
Um, and I wonder like I've never it seems like an insane thing to do, but perhaps someone in the comic world out there would want to do it as like a fun time activity, but I certainly don't, would be to like go through different like masters of the craft and see incrementally when viewers could start noticing like a change in their work.
Yeah.
And see how many years it took. Cause now I'm just kind of curious at like, we draw every day. What
Hmm.
rate do we improve?
Yeah.
Um,
Is there some
I
sort of
sound so
formula to
mercenary. I'm
this?
not trying to make it sound so mercenary, but like,
Yeah.
you like getting better is fun.
Yeah.
Or staying
No,
stagnant is
it
also fun, I guess, if you like what you're doing.
it is, it is when you, especially when you notice it. Like I'm finishing up the fifth issue of something now, and I look back at the first issue because I had to reference some things, and I'm like, oh, this was like 2 years ago, but like I'm a lot better than I was 2 years ago.
Yeah, feels good.
It's like, okay, I feel a little bit better about that. But then also like, oh man, this was me 2 years ago. I thought this was
Yeah.
me better than me 3 years ago,
Yeah,
and things like
right?
that. So, and it brings up this quote from Ira Glass that I'm gonna greatly reduce and paraphrase, but basically he talks about how, you know, our our taste is always good. That's why we start doing things we do creatively. We have good, we have our idea of our taste, what we like. And as we get better and we improve, you know, we're always chasing our taste, because as we
Hmm.
get better and improve and we're more immersed in things, our tastes improve. Our tastes get
Hmm.
refined. So even though we are technically getting better, we're still chasing where our taste is going, where our preferences are landing and all that. And your idea of like just going back and like seeing when did these pros like these masters like improve, when did they make these like giant leaps, is really interesting because I can think of one artist who I think did like the fastest, like they came out great off the gate, but then within a handful of years, like their styles like drastically different, and that's Trad Moore.
I would agree. Yeah.
Because he came out with Legacy Luther Strode. I loved his work in
Love
that
his
book. I just loved
yeah, it
his
was
line work in that book.
so damn. I really still like what he's putting out too. I think
Yeah,
you're right. It's changed quite a bit. It's an interesting
yeah,
metamorphosis.
and I say this with all the respect. Like it's still aesthetically great, but it's not for me.
That's
Like that
real.
that style has changed. Like it's not something that grabs me the same way he did when he first started. And I don't say, oh, I want him to draw like that again, because no, that's
Yeah.
that's
He can't.
reductive to think about. Like, and that would be insulting. Like, I want you to draw like you used to. Like, no, that's
Hmm.
dumb. But I just think about like and he still has plenty of things I've seen. I'm like, that's killer. But like as a whole, like I was just like, wow, that's just such a huge shift.
Hmm.
And I try to think of like some of the larger artists in the industry now, like Daniel Warren Johnson, and I look back at like his stuff in Space Mullet to his stuff in Transformers now, and I'm like, I don't see I don't see a huge shift in his style, but it's definitely like on the other edge of it where his style is kind of the same, but he's just refined it so much
Hmm.
to the point it is where he is without a doubt, improved and technically better than he was when he first came out, but it's still visually this visual signature is still kind of there.
Hmm.
Um, and then thinking just in more general terms, like someone like Frank Miller, you know, love him or hate him, it's the shift from Daredevil to Dark Knight to Sin City to After.
Cubist Wonder Woman squatting menacingly. He,
And
yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I think people take it a little too far, and maybe someone should tell
yeah,
them you've taken your shape language to a terrible, terrible place, and you should back it up. But that's what
yeah,
friends are for, right? Like they come in and they're like,
yeah,
that no longer looks human. You gotta refine that shape.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And with just in my own, this is my own thoughts about the situation. You don't represent anybody else on the podcast. With in regards to Frank Miller's just his work, his current work or whatever, I feel like someone like that who's kind of done it all and has like made industry staples throughout his career up until that point, up until the 2000s at the very least. It's kind of like, okay, maybe it's not visually appealing or as strong as someone I think, but also like just do whatever the fuck you want now at this point. Like you've created landmark books for so many people.
mhm.
You've like I remember when Sin City came out, then like Jim Lee tried to do Sin City, like the other like biggest artist in the
No,
in the in the industry
I
at the time
don't
tried to do
because
Sin City.
I never like all of this shit. Like I have no I love slash hate going to comic conventions because I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I don't know
Yeah.
any comics history about any of like. I didn't read comic books full fucking stop until I was in college. They
Yeah.
just weren't around. Like they weren't
Yeah.
around. Like it's super weird because like they weren't around for girls, but they kind of weren't around for girls or non-binary people or like people who lived in a rural town that didn't let them use the library because I had a very very
Hmm.
large unpaid fine. And so like they were just like a non-existent entity to me. I would get a copy of the Sandman every year for my birthday and Christmas that my mom would get from Borders with a coupon, and then that was like it. That was all.
Yeah.
So I just never knew. And then like by the time I went to college, I was like, well, I don't care about that subject matter, so I'll just never read it. So then I read like
Mm-hmm.
weird shit like Dame Darcy, and I was like, I love this stuff. And from there, you get into Silver Sprocket, and so I have like no. I used to work with people who would get really upset. They're like, you have no respect for the masters, and I don't really because they weren't. I understand like culturally why they are
It's
relevant and how they have had a lot of relevance for people's lives. But I
mm-hmm.
came up through a completely different way of comics
Yeah.
that just had no influence on essentially. Like it was just
Yeah.
never even something that like people around me suggested to read until I started going to like larger repop shows and kind of doing like meeting more people who were working with like traditional publishers or
Yeah.
just other comic publishers in general. And sometimes I feel like I'm really lacking. Like there are certainly
Mm-hmm.
things that I've said that are really stupid, or people that I've like straight up met and I didn't know who they were, which is always a little bit cringe for me. But I also I feel very lucky that like I don't necessarily comics, especially since it's so new, seems like it's growing so rapidly and changing so quickly. I don't think it would be like unrealistic to expect that my cultural touchstones would be different, and I don't really expect like in 30 years, hopefully like my apprentice, because I hope that comics is like an apprenticeship system. I hope that they're just like, I don't give a single shit about what you used to read. That stuff is weird. I'm into this
Yeah.
now. This is the
Yeah.
cool comic stuff. And I'm just like, Dane Darcy.
Yeah.
She is really cool though,
Yeah.
and I think people
Yeah.
should read more of her stuff.
Well, it is, I want to say rare because that's just uh from the general comic circles that I'm in, there are
Hmm.
more people who have the same or similar touchstones as I do. But, you know, that's totally fine. Like I'm very much a person who like I'm not gonna say you didn't read.
No.
You weren't loving the image boom in the early '90s. How dare you? Like, no, who gives a shit? Like, it is what it is. Um, and also I kind of feel like people forget that so many of these like older books, like some of Frank Miller's older work, or just Alan Moore, or Sandman, or things like that.
Hmm.
Those things are still talked about now because, in the grand scheme of things, like they were the really good ones at the time, and
Yeah.
everything else isn't necessarily bad. It's just they weren't everyone's kind of like agreeance on like, oh, this is really good, because there's
Hmm.
plenty of comics in my youth I'm like, I love these comics. No one's gonna give a shit about. No one gives a shit about X-Men 2099. I love X-Men
Oh.
2099. No one gives a
Oh.
shit about that. Everyone loves Spider-Man 2099, and that's because of Into the Spider-Verse and all that. No one gives a shit about X-Men 2099 from 1996, but I do, and I don't expect people to. And I think that's one of the things that I think is better now, because more, one, aid people aging out from just being uh all 90s kind of, the 80s 90s kind of being like, that's what you read. Now it's like past 20 years in comics have been so insanely varied and wild, and it's just getting more and more diverse and crazy.
Yeah.
So like, expecting people to have the same touchstones is really like your own fault
It's yeah.
if you get bothered by that.
It was always very strange because it would I have felt very, very blessed. As you have so much of the same comics family that I do. To have just known like really cool people who I feel very lucky to know many different comics people of many different ages, both older than and younger than me, who
Mm-hmm.
both make sure that I don't forget like dumb history things because I'm very impulsive, and also keep me like fresh and new and thinking about new things because I don't get to read very much anymore. And so I actually haven't like read a new comic or listened to new music in a really long time because it's just like I work 10 to 12 hours a day and I watch 90 Day Fiance on repeat, and then I listen to podcasts about 90 Day Fiance on repeat. And it turns out that there's a lot of them, so I can just kind of do that ad infinitum until all my books are done or until the sun goes out. But because of that, like I just I'm not really up to date, and so I get really stale. And that's not really
Yeah.
like an okay way to be either. Um,
Yeah.
I think that speaks a lot to like just poor work life balance though, and it could be better if I would take a break.
Yeah.
But like it's I was really grateful for the Sandman. I really loved them when
Hmm.
I was a kid. It was like how I got into comics because I knew Neil Gaiman as a kid.
Yeah.
Because I was like a teenage kid in the early aughts, and that was the shit. And so um, I don't really know now. Like it's going to be kind of odd. Like it's I don't know if it's a joke, but a lot of like AFAB comic book friends of mine all joke that like Becky Cloonan is our influence because like for a long time it felt like Becky Cloonan was the only person doing like comics in the game who wasn't a dude and was doing like cool like heavy ink stuff. And so like if you were doing like cool heavy ink stuff, you're gonna get compared to Becky Cloonan. Um, my buddy Sally, I think especially like she has like these super crunchy thick lines and I'm sure she gets it all the time. And it's just because, of course, like she was the one that you knew of. But now
Yeah.
everybody, so many people are doing different comics, and there's like so many webtoons and weird shit like that. So like, truly anybody's doing comics out there, and the internet is so mysterious. So everyone's like super legitimate, but also like not legitimate at all. So you have no idea who's like, I don't know. Everything feels like it's in like a weird it's like a super level playing field that's like not level at all and super in flux all the time because the industry is just
Yeah.
like on fire. So
Hmm.
not again, Carl Giff, it don't matter. None of this matters.
Yeah.
Ugh. It don't matter,
It's
none of this
no, yeah,
matters.
it's the landscape is just so weird now. And even just a few years ago it felt like, oh, everyone's doing really good at all these independent comics are doing really good on Kickstarter. Like, and then it like the past year it's been like, wow, I've seen some really great projects limp to that finish line or like even not get funded. And it's
Well, it's
like,
because fucking comic book publishers have decided that instead of paying their
yeah,
artists any sort of livable wage, they'll just take it to Kickstarter, therefore delegitimizing Kickstarter for all of the independent artists who use it. Also, it
yeah,
fractured into so many different like crazy ass little pieces. So now we're like on Crowder or GoFundMe, not
Zoop.
GoFundMe for a comic book, not yet.
No.
Uh, Backer Kit, like all these crazy things, and so like you're splitting
Hmm.
your audience all these different ways, and we had Twitter, now Twitter's gone, and that
Yeah.
like it feels super fucking crazy to always be like, yeah, so my job as a comic book artist, I'm on Twitter all day long, but it really felt like for a long time that's where people got a lot of jobs. It was a
Yeah. I got
somewhat
a lot of jobs
important,
from Twitter.
yeah,
Hmm.
it was a super important networking tool. And when it was gone, it was super crazy because it was like, it leveled the playing field for a lot of people who were Twitter famous, but now we're just like, ah, shit, I'm like actually just in the slog with the rest of people. Because
Yeah.
the secret to Twitter, like after you get a certain amount of followers, is it does matter, but it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't translate to money or like any sort of tangible thing except for like clicks and shit. But now
Hmm.
when that's gone, everyone's just in the same hole. Publishers crawled in
Yeah.
there with us, which is stupid. They should get out. That's what they have their
Yeah.
investors for. That's what they are
Exactly.
for. Kickstarter is for us.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that there's been a lot of smaller publishers who have just really uh been bad, you know, like,
Yes.
and have made really dumb moves and really just I'm trying to choose my words carefully here.
I would just say I was like,
Um
yeah, I was like, I don't want to like be I don't choose my words carefully anymore because I also sometimes think some shit's just really ridiculous. And it's just like you
yeah.
talk about it with normal people who have like normal day jobs just casually like at a bar
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh
It's
my
just like,
god, what?" And so you're just like, "Oh,
yeah,
that's not normal for you. That's super normal for me." And
like,
it or
yeah.
like you just casually mention how the book industry works to someone who like has read a single book before and they're like,
Yeah.
"What?" It's appalling. Like it's just crazy dumb it's just dumb
Hmm.
shit, just truly just dumb shit
Yeah.
stacks. um
Yeah.
But we don't have to
It's
talk about
it.
that's so sad for so late at night to discuss a problem that we can't
Well,
solve.
we're roughly an hour into recording, and normally this is done at the beginning of the show, but I feel now is an appropriate time to kind of bring it back and bring some positivity back before we wrap up. And that is, Marie, comics, coffee, metal. What are you digging right now?
I just told you I haven't read anything or
I know,
listened to
but
anything.
we gotta do something.
Except for 90. Do
No,
you want to hear about who I love on 90 Day Fiance and who I hate the most on 90 Day Fiance?
what,
Do you want to hear about MILF Manor? My MILF Minute? I love my MILFs.
I if that's what you're enjoying
No,
media wise, please
it's
share.
horrible. I don't really want to talk about it. I do want to talk about it desperately all the time, but I also understand why people probably would not want to talk about it. I really have been in like this music dead zone for a while where like, I got some sad news, and so I've kind of been in this weird spot
Hmm.
where I don't want to I don't want to listen to music that I really like because I don't want to like associate it with bad stuff and then hate it. And
Fair.
so I have been listening to a lot of like I started off listening to a lot of Britney Spears, and so now it's like become like a weird mix of things. Not because like I hate Britney Spears or anything, just because it's like
Hmm.
music that I can kind of tune out.
Yeah.
But before that, I was listening to like a lot of I just seen the chats pretty recently. They came through St. Louis and played a great. Oh, that was such a good show. Oh my god, they played a great show. So I've been listening to a lot of the chats. I've been listening to a lot of Angel Dust because I saw Angel Dust recently. I love Angel Dust. Um, and then Big Frida. Like I am a huge Big Frida fan, and I wrote a lot of Death to the Wizard Kings, actually the Big Frida albums and like Bounce albums and stuff like that. So I listen to a lot of that. And then my metal stuff though, like it's been so I've been kind of boring. Like I've just kind of been
Mm.
listening to my old trieds and truths, my Within Temptations, my Processor, my
Nice.
Zeromancer, my weird industrial shit. But I did. It's not like really an appropriate anecdote to tell at other shows because they don't talk about metal. But I do. I had an OCD trigger that was kind of funny once, where I got right. So like OCD doesn't make any sense, and so you have like crazy dumb shit that you do frequently. And for some reason, I thought that something very bad would happen, nebulously bad, if I stopped
Hmm.
listening to Nightwish's Tribal, which is like a song where they have like dogs barking for like nine. It's like a super weird long song, and I would
I
have to
I
listen to it on. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's super
I'm
weird.
a Nightwish fan. Yes, I know.
Yeah,
That's why I'm laughing because
yeah.
that song in particular, just like
Oh,
having that one on repeat. I'm like, that's a
wow.
song.
Hour for days like when Spotify like came through with the yearly review, they were like, you listened to Nightwish's Tribal for like 27 days, and I was like, sure did. I thought I was gonna die. It was crazy. And so I would like do meetings or therapy sessions or just anything, and I would have like one earphone was like Nightwish's Tribal and the other one was like the stuff that I had to do. And safe to say, it came on
It's
my like Spotify Discover the other day, and I did not refresh it. I just
yeah.
continued past Nightwish's Tribal.
I had totally spaced that that you dabble with the symphonic metal too because you brought up Within Temptation. I'm like, I don't
Yeah, I
think
love Within
anyone else has
Temptation.
brought up Within Temptation on this show yet,
They did a whole ass collaboration with Exhibit, which was like also
and it
like,
was
what the fuck were
good,
you doing with Exhibit? It was good.
and it
I
was
really liked
good.
it. That's like my well, I like when I write. I like listening to like stuff that has like a story. So I listen to like I'm not trying to discredit these bands by saying like I can't remember who they are, but a lot of them are just kind of like soundtrack bands,
Yeah.
or just like I'm never gonna see them live. But like I love Depeche Mode, and that was kind of like not really
Hmm.
my introduction to metal, but like how I like discovered that I liked industrial music, and then from industrial music I liked metal, like symphonic metal, and then I liked weirdly enough like from symphonic metal and industrial and rave music to bounce, and then when I thought when I got to college I was going to be a goth. I was all ready to be a goth. When I got to college, I was like, oh shit, I'm a punk actually because I'm very lazy, but I'm very mad. And so
Yeah.
it was like a weird flip. And so I didn't listen to as much metal anymore. I started getting way more into punk music just because you just kind of find your way towards that stuff. I suppose I don't know.
Hmm.
So like my metal taste didn't. It just kind of like stayed where I was, and so I still really love
Hmm.
like all the metal bands that I love from high school. I haven't really found a lot of new people. I go out with like Kelly and Dave when they're in town for shows, and I go and I get a new metal album based on a cover that I like.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, I've chosen really well, but I don't really know what I've chosen. I can't read them. But I like them. And then
Mm-hmm.
Within Temptation, like especially for some reason, like I've just got like a really fucking. Oh, LVUT, that's the other one I really like. The one that's like
Oh, okay. Okay.
I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
them, the Gaulish one, and the Who, the HU, which is like a Mongolian death metal band.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love them. I got to see them live actually in St. Louis a
Oh,
couple
that's
years
gotta be a
back
trip.
before COVID. It's awesome. But they like came, so they played at a super small bar off like just like a busy street in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And my buddy was like, "Did you get tickets to see the Who? Did you get tickets to see the Who?" And I was like, "Who the fuck in St. Louis is gonna go see a Mongolian death metal band? We'll walk in the door, it'll be fine." The line was out the door, and she was like, "See, I told you we should have gotten tickets beforehand." I was like, God, she was right. This is the same friend who has all my art stuff too, so maybe I should listen to her. She has blackmail.
Ah.
But we get there, and it's just like an odd mix of people because it's such a weird band. They didn't have more than 12 songs at the time, so they played their set.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really speak English, so they like shouted out like this song is for woman, and then all the women sang and screamed, and they played Wolf Totem, and we all lost our shit, and then they played You But You, and we lost our shit again, and then they left, and they went outside, and they stood outside the door for like 30 seconds, and then they all came back inside, and they played their encore, which was just the first three songs of their set over again, because they again only had like 12 songs, so they'd already played them.
Yeah.
It was great. It was really fun, and it was just like I don't know. It was like one of my favorite shows because it was just it was so weird, but they're really cool to see live because they've got all their instruments and they're all packed up there on
Mm-hmm.
stage together. They're so close. Oh, it was so cool.
Yeah. It's
Highly.
my my wife and I we saw Nightwish at a 1,500 seat club or
Did
standing
they?
club.
But did they play Tribal 16
This was
times in a
before
row?
Tribe. This is when Endless Forms Most Beautiful came out.
That's a good
So it was their
album.
first album with Floor as the vocalist.
A good
And
album.
in even in that little club or whatever, it's I've seen their live videos. I have their live DVD with Tarja, back then. And then so even then that they played it like it was this huge thing. And
It's
um
beautiful.
they yeah, it just made me want to go see them like in like I wish I could see them like in like a festival context where they have
God,
just
it'd be so cool.
everything just
Yeah.
going, or even like a theater, because
Yeah.
there's a live there's when Floriansen was announced as the vocalist. They released, well, as the official vocalist or whatever, they released a live version of Ghost Love Score from, I know it's because I I have ADHD, so I have it's not necessarily like the OCD thing, but like I have the hyperfixation. Like if I get a new song I like, it's the
Yeah.
new song I like
You really
forever.
like it.
Um, and so it's but so that was one of the things I did, and it's like a 9-minute song. And I would have it on like all day. Um, but like that performance of that was like the thing that like so like not that the fans of the band were like hesitant about her because she was already established as a well-known vocalist. Her band After Forever before Nightwish. I don't know if you ever checked that out.
I haven't, but I'm gonna. Now
After
that I know
Forever,
about them,
it's
after
really good.
forever.
I would definitely highly suggest them if you like her voice, because also like the
Yeah,
newest Nightwish stuff is more folky. They're getting back to that more folky sound, and if you like that more aggressive metally era they had,
I typically
After
do.
Forever is
That's
definitely up that alley. But anyway,
fuck yeah.
she hits like a note at the end of Ghost Love Score. If you're not familiar with the song, there's like a big crescendo at the end of it,
Hmm.
and it's just one of those things where it's just like it gives you the goosebumps,
Hmm.
and it's just one of those, it's so like, and this it was the video's like in a theater in Buenos Aires or something like that, and I'm like that's where I want to see them next time I see them, but that'll never happen because they're not that big in the States, or they're not big enough in the States to do something like that.
God, it'd be crazy though if they did like a Vegas show where they had like the whole dome. You can do some crazy
It,
shit.
they are perfect for something like a Vegas
I
show with
know.
like just like have like
A
Cirque du Soleil doing
spectacle.
it with them and all
Yes,
that.
yes,
I
and then
would
but people, if you fucking put Cirque du Soleil to Nightwish, people, the normies would go, and then they would learn to love
Yeah.
Nightwish. They would be like, "This is the coolest shit
Yes.
ever." Actually, it is legitimately very cool to see all these traditional medieval instruments being preserved by heavy metal.
Yeah.
It's
They hired Nightwish. They put in the band a guy who plays the like those instruments. Like I think he had like a little
fucking hurdy gurdy. It's the
accordion.
hurdy gurdy
Hurt.
player, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
yep.
It's like, all right, you're official member of the band playing
Well,
the
and then
hurdy
there was
gurdy.
like when
Yeah.
LVUT like disbanded and like part of I think it was like the pan flute player and the hurdy gurdy state player stayed on, and then everyone else like went off and did Cellar Darling or I don't know. I A comics drama is too much for me. That's why I stick with my 90 day. So I certainly don't get into the metal stuff. I can't imagine how niche that drama gets. It must be wild stuff.
Now,
Um,
part of doing the show is like I have to kind of force myself to read and listen to things. I
mhm,
want to recommend things, or people talk about things and I want to check them out. Or if someone's not into metal or something like that, I've kind
mhm,
of recently taken upon myself to like try to convert them a little bit. Try to, say,
mhm.
hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you like this band? What's the heaviest you go? Okay, how about this? Because metal is such a wide ranging, um, form of music that it's easy to find something that someone will like. I think, um, but yeah, it's the symphonic metal isn't always one I can get people on because it seems like just like maybe too much for some people, but then there's some people who are like, I don't know, if you just give it a shot, you could be like, oh,
It's
this is actually super cool and really
it's
fun.
so grand. It's like such fantasy music and
Yeah.
weird and gr- grimy and mean. It's like Mordor. I don't
Right.
know. Did you ever listen to their Chicago or they were? I don't. I mean, they've all probably moved on since. But like Tubring, that used to be my shit when I was like middle school through high school. I got
What was
super
the
into
name again?
Tubring. I got super into like
Tubbring.
tumbring. I got super into like experimental shit. So it was like Dog Fashion Disco and Polka Dot Cadaver and Tubring and shit like that. It was super cool.
No, I can't say I've heard of them.
You should check
In
them
terms of
out.
like,
They're super weird experimental stuff, but they're fun. I still like. It feels weird to say like they hold up because I was listening to them when I was in seventh grade, but they still kind of hold up. They're pretty sick. Um, Same with
yeah,
Skeleton Key, which is like a different sort of experimental thing.
yeah, Chicago band. I think like the most recent, like, even though they got big, in uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, in that circle they got big, but like Russian Circles
Hmm.
was the last like Chicago area band that was kind of like, even then they were just more like just an instrumental band that had a
Hmm.
lot of distorted bass and stuff, and not super experimental in terms of like if you think about other experimental things, but definitely not radio stuff. But
Hmm.
I would I bring up there's like there should probably be a drinking game with this podcast, but about the bands I bring up just because I'm just there with a lot of these bands right now. But there's a band called Spirit Box. I don't know if you've checked them out before.
Hmm. I
Um,
should check them
I
out.
I feel like you would dig them just because they do enough different things with their sound. Like it's very sometimes it's like very like electronic beat focused, but there's like big heavy guitars.
Hmm.
The vocalist Courtney LaPlante, she can sing, but she also has like a killer like harsh growl vocal as well.
Hmm.
And it's always done well dynamically in terms of like where it is in the thing. I don't know, I don't think you're versed to any type of harsh vocals in
You would
music.
be surprised, actually. I don't typically go super heavy, and I don't typically go super
Hmm.
screamo. I'll take like an operatic situation, and I'll take someone
Yeah.
yelling for a brief period of time. But I'm not super duper heavy. I don't know. Mark Bouchard is always trying to get me into like heavier stuff, and
Yeah,
I
they
can't. I just not. It's never been for me. I don't know.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I like I like music that goes very quickly.
Hmm.
I don't like I don't typically like a lot of growling. I don't like a lot of
Okay.
rasping. I don't like a lot of like slow build to the roar, just because
Hmm.
it doesn't resonate very well within me. I don't know. I can't really
Okay.
explain why. There's no
No,
deeper.
no, I
Yeah,
get it. It's definitely a thing. So maybe they won't be 100% for you, but I think it's
that's
still worth
whatever.
checking out
Yeah, I was like, music is
because they're
music. If
not
I don't like
all,
them, I won't listen to them.
yeah, they're not all, they're not, it's not all the same thing all the time, I guess is
Yeah,
what I'm at. Um,
sick.
but yeah, and you bring up Mark. They have definitely sent lots of bands my way.
Yeah,
There's one I think I sent a I think I passed them off to you too. I think that was Mind Force or
maybe
something.
I have a
It was
single
very
brain cell that's
thrashy,
in
hardcore type of
operation.
stuff where it was really, Mark
If
suggested that to
if
me.
it was at C2E2 this year, I have no memory. I have no memory of
Uh,
anything. My
no,
brain has.
I think you posted something like I need music for
Oh, for throwing
something.
my cups. So probably then I would
Yeah,
listen to it if I was throwing my cups. I probably listen to it then for sure. Because that's typically now how I
yeah.
get into music is like, if the first five people answer that quickly, I just listen to that album until the cups are thrown. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's been kind of, people have been sending me a lot of asynchronic stuff lately, and I do not care to
Hmm.
throw to it. It's very stressful.
Ah,
So that needs to
yeah.
stop. I should stop
Yeah.
asking, but I've gotten a lot of really good recommendations too. And the rule is like,
Yeah,
you listen to the whole album, you throw the whole cup. So
yeah,
sometimes it's good,
yeah.
sometimes it's
I've
bad.
I had to look up just so sure, but yeah, yeah. Mark had suggested one of the bands they suggested was Mind Force New Lords was the album. 17 minutes, 10 tracks.
Oh yeah, they
Like,
suggested that one. Yes, to me as well.
and it's. I'm not really into like the hardcore style of punk metal crossover kind of stuff,
Hmm.
but they definitely uh bridged a gap for me there. So I was thankful that Mark did that. If I
Mark's
see,
got killer taste.
he's, yeah, yeah, they
They've
got
got real good
absolutely killer
taste.
taste. Because there's a few more bands they suggested to me, and I thankfully I had messaged them on Twitter asking again what the bands were because we spoke in person about it, and they wrote it down so I can actually go back now and say, okay, what was that again? Because my memory would be that's like
Single
S like
cell.
that. So, but well, how about coffee? Coffee.
That
I know you got
I was like, I
a
got my
coffee
prop
prop
out
as
like
you so
before we even got
stated.
started.
Yeah.
I've been drinking for the past year. It's tax deductible, baby. I order monthly Mississippi Mud from St. Louis, Missouri. Shit's really
Nice.
good. Good. I like it. It comes to me in a big bag. I drink a bag every 3 weeks, give or take. Um, yeah, I love coffee. Drink a lot of coffee. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
when my husband quit drinking as much coffee and the coffee didn't last as long as I thought it would, I was a little upset. I
Mm-hmm.
grew up drinking coffee with my mom, and now she has had to reduce her coffee intake to a single cup a day. And it's like a
Mm.
titan has fallen, and my world is shaken, and the sun doesn't shine so bright anymore. So
It's yeah, it's
that day's gonna come for me, and I'm not happy because I like my life of endless coffee drinking. I gave up smoking so I could drink coffee. When I got sick, my doctor was like, "You can have a cigarette or you can have coffee, but you cannot have both." And I was like, "Coffee, no question. Coffee, love coffee. Coffee's you can have coffee with anybody anywhere,
yeah,
and it's less expensive and it tastes delicious. So good."
exactly. Are you do you do just like a regular drip coffee maker or
No, I'm bougie. So I
okay.
left a really bad working situation a couple of years ago, and when I would talk to my therapist about the only redeeming factor of working there, I would say the coffee maker. There was an espresso maker, and I initially had really I was so mad at it. It was like I don't enjoy, I don't love joy, I guess, and so I was very like hateful of it. I was like, oh fuck this coffee maker. We should have spent our money a different way. But then I grew to really love it, and I was like, I love your espresso maker. It's just like a wonderful little espresso maker. It makes just like lattes and americanos and shit like that, and I
Hmm.
grew to love it. And when I left, I was like, I want one. And Bed Bath and Beyond was having like an extreme sale, and so instead of paying my my way that particular month after I had left, I used that money to buy a coffee maker at the behest of my therapist. So I have like a super nice bougie espresso maker. And if it breaks, it's like I think about it, it's like the one bougie purchase that I would go out and make immediately. Like if my TV broke, I'd be like, eh. You know what? If my record player broke, I would probably go replace
Right.
that too. But like, I wouldn't replace like a gaming console. I'd just be like, it's broken now. It'll get fixed when it gets fixed. But if the coffee maker broke, I'd be like, I need $700 right now to go get a new espresso machine. I have opened up coffee commissions. Please help me. But it was like, it was really great. And so I love my coffee machine.
Mhm.
And we have like a French press and we have like a coffee pot because when we have, my family comes over, we'll drink probably like a pot or two an hour between us
Mhm.
consistently throughout the entire visit. So if it goes on for like 12 hours, it's like the 12-hour coffee is continuous.
Yeah.
And so that's not very practical to have an espresso machine for that sort of situation. You need to have like a drip maker. So we have like
Yeah.
a shitty Mr. Coffee and then like a big pot and then like an
Mhm.
old weird espresso maker that you put on the stove. That's fun in a different sort of way. Really want to get a Turkish coffee pot and try to do that, but that's like an involved process and I'm quite lazy. So,
Yeah,
what about
I've
you?
we're just, I have the French press. I have a couple of French presses, simple ones. We just got not too long ago a pitcher that has like a filter in the middle for cold brew.
Ooh,
So, and we
that's
just
super
upgraded
nice.
to a burr grinder as opposed to the blade grinder.
That's a nice
Again,
grinder.
it's a cheap. It's like the Mr. Coffee burr grinder, whatever, $60 or whatever from Target, but it is still so much nicer than a blade grinder. And just I noticed instantly like, oh wow, it just tastes better this way. And
I
I love
don't.
it also because it has a hopper in there, so I can just fill it up with beans for a few days, and then like tomorrow, like I'm gonna get up early. I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna come home, you know, and then I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna press the button. It's already set to how many cups we're gonna brew, so it's gonna automatically just grind it. I take the dog out. I come back. It's done grinding. I just get the coffee going.
That's beautiful.
Now with the drip coffee, again, people listen to the show. They're gonna hear me. I'll repeat this ad nauseum, but I'm talking to you, not them. Sorry, everybody. So with the drip coffee maker, I've done this because of the fancy coffee people on YouTube said, yeah, try this. And basically, you let it fill up, but then you take the carafe out. If you have the sneak a cup feature where it doesn't drip down, and then you kind of like go in, kind of like you would with a French press, where you would like let it
Okay.
soak, swirl it around a little bit, and but here like you let it build up, swirl it around a bit, so make sure all the the grounds get saturated and all that, and then you put it back in, so then it'll start draining. So that way, more of it gets saturated as it goes,
Huh.
and it makes a
Interesting.
difference. It makes a
Huh.
difference.
Interesting.
Um, it's a dangerous game to play because if you forget that you took the carafe out, all of a sudden it's overflowing from the top, and then you got to clean out your coffee maker, because you got grounds
Interesting.
everywhere now.
Oh, that is a
But
dangerous
um,
game.
that's been kind of my go-to. I have my all my settings, like I'll put it in. I'll set my timer on my watch for a couple minutes. I know it takes 2 minutes before I have to like go and do it and then put everything back together. So I have my little routine for that. But I do want to try like pour overs and stuff. I just don't have the um
I do
I
all
think if I
that
buy
stuff.
another coffee thing like contraption or whatever, uh I don't know where I'm gonna put it.
Yeah, that's always the
it's
thing too, right? Like
it's
where is their counter space? We only have the
yeah,
espresso machine and the rice cooker out on our counter, and
yeah,
that's just what we have. Those are the appliances.
yeah,
But I love the rice
yeah,
cooker too. Rice cooker's
yeah.
great.
And I would suggest if you're interested in cold brews, um, I have to see. I have to figure out where we got. I think I just bought it from Amazon somewhere, but yeah, it's just like a pitcher. It has a filter in the middle. You put the grounds in, you screw it in, you put it.
Hell
It
yeah.
works fantastic.
Hell
Like we,
yeah.
we do that. We put our Brita filter water in there and let it sit for a day, and we got some great cold brew. If cold brew is your thing too,
I love all coffee
um,
equally.
so
I
but yeah,
drink
I
it all.
yeah I try to fancy it up as much as I can. Um, And since you guys are moving up to closer to my neck of the woods, there are a few roasters in the area that if you're interested in checking out non-Mississippi mud, or if
I'm
you're like,
not.
nope, for life,
I'm I'm
never
I'm
gonna stray.
I'm on. I'm sold for life. If I'm gonna leave my beloved arch behind, I will have my Mississippi mud with me, at the very very
Okay.
least.
Well, if the time comes, there's a few Illinois roasters and a couple Wisconsin roasters that I've really taken to that I would highly recommend in case that happens. But I will dare not try to sway you from your Mississippi mud.
The smirch my
I'll probably have to
Mississippi
try that
mud.
myself. Actually, I'll probably have to look up
I'll bring
some
some up,
material.
and when my life becomes not an insane hellfire, then you can come over and have a cup of coffee from my fancy coffee machine, as long as it doesn't break. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. All right, Marie. Well, I've taken up enough of your time. It's probably should wrap all of this up. It's been a blast finally getting to chat with you and all that, and we'll definitely have to do it again before it's been too long.
Yeah.
Definitely not another 137 episodes.
Not, not another 137 for sure.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah.
not at a time when
What?
my life is on fire. Next year
Yeah, yeah.
we can do an
Once,
anniversary follow up.
yeah. That's 100% something that would be awesome. There's also, I've been wanting to like start putting together some more like, oh, have you met this person? No, okay, let's all do a podcast.
Ah, oh
Basically.
no!
um,
It sounds like it
but
could be.
I might, but for you, I might just, I might just get Patrick from Challengers on as well,
Oh, I
and
love
we'll all just
Patrick.
jam,
Patrick's real
jam
fun.
on since it'll be Patrick's a good safe person for all of us.
I love Patrick. Patrick's
Because
great.
you think you know a lot of people in comics, and then you talk to Patrick. I'm like, I don't know anybody.
Patrick
Patrick
knows
knows everybody, and
everybody.
everybody knows
Everybody.
Patrick. Yeah, but again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Death to the Wizard Kings looks
Look at the Wizard
awesome.
Kings.
We didn't talk too much about that, but it is a really really cool looking book.
Yeah, I
Um,
definitely need to do a pressed circuit for my book. At some point, I will talk about my book that I do instead of whatever I talked about here today. But
yeah,
it's
and
good.
yeah, and the preview you sent me for Controlled Burn looks really really awesome as well.
Yeah.
Even in pencils form, it looks great. It's interesting to see how much of your style and your imagery is just so apparent just in the pencils. Like I can see the inks on it already, you know, and that's really cool because you sure as shit can't do that with my stuff.
Yeah, most people probably do not do pencils like I do them. I don't necessarily know that I would recommend doing them the way that I do them, but they do look cool every step of the way, which is kind of neat. So, or at least
Yeah,
satisfactory for
exactly.
me.
Exactly,
So,
exactly. So,
yeah,
yeah, that is all I got for now. Marie, now is the time to let everybody know where they can find you online.
I am at my website soengery.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter because social media is dying. Or you can join the Cartoonist
Yes.
Co-op, and I will never answer the Discord messages because I'm terrible at Discord and I don't really like talking to strangers. But you can join a committee, and then we can be on a committee together, and we can do some fun like Cartoonist Co-op stuff, and make the working environment better for everybody in comics, which is great. So that's awesome. So join me there. That's the
Awesome.
place to go.
And I'll make sure there's links to your website and all that in the show notes below. Once again, Marie, thank you so much for coming on.
All right, thanks, Don.